One. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the World Changing Podcast. Now, I did not mispronounce that word. I did not do a typo or anything. I'm looking at my notes. There's no typo on that. I'm saying welcome because of how important it truly is to welcome wealth into your life. Now, wealth can mean so many things: financial, spiritual, physical, emotional, and social. And luckily, I've been grateful to be growing in that wealth in all five realms. And speaking of allowing myself to grow into those realms, I am joined today by a very, very good friend of mine. She is the host of the absolutely amazing Blush Podcast, a podcast designed, well, I'll let it put it into her own words, but from my understanding is one of the best relationship advice coaching podcasts that are out there. And so today I am joined by my very good friend, Hiwa. Hiwa, tell me a story. How has your week, how has your day, how's life been going so far?
It's been good. Thank you so much for that introduction. It is Hiwa, though.
Hiwa.
I was born in Germany, and in German, W's are pronounced like V's. So it's just been this like awful curse that my parents have put upon me, where I constantly have to explain that my name isn't pronounced like it's spelled. But thank you so much for that introduction.
Absolutely. And Hiwa. Yes, I will make sure I get that right. Hiwa.
It's so hard, honestly. Like half my friends call me Hiwa. Like I went through school, I gave up when I moved to the US. So people always called me Hiwa. It really wasn't until I started the podcast that I was like, I need to like pronounce my name correctly on my own podcast.
You know what's so crazy? So, of course, I've been grateful enough to help so many people in terms of what I do in terms of my own industry. And even though people know that my name is spelled like Jordan, people call me some weird pronunciations. I get Jorge, I get Jason, I get George. I'm like, none of those are correct, but that's okay. I know that what you're trying to do is give me that attention. So thank you.
Yeah.
Even though my name is Jordan.
It's like such a simple name too. Like mine, I understand why there's an issue, but that's so funny.
It is funny. And again, it's more like it happens, you move on from it. You don't let it get to you too much. But anyway, we have more important conversation to talk about, which is I want to start off with the Blush Podcast. As I have said before, it's an absolutely incredible relationship, dating, just life advice coaching podcast that I have been privileged, grateful enough to catch a few episodes about and also talk about on my own social media handles. But I cannot do it justice. I can give a great review and I can tell a story about it. However, the main story should come from the creator of said podcast. So Hiwa, can you tell me a little bit more about the Blush Podcast for everybody?
Sure. So it's honestly evolved so much. It really started because the summer of 2020, I started dating for the first time in years. Like I had been celibate for 7 years, and then I dated this guy for a few months, and then we broke up, and I again wasn't dating. So summer of 2020, early 2020, like most people, my life was super disrupted. And unlike everyone else, I felt like I sat around and I was like, things really aren't that different for me. Like I was working from home before, I'm working from home now. I barely socialized before, I'm not socializing now. And I was alone before and I'm alone now. And maybe I should have taken advantage of the opportunities that were available when the world was open. So I kind of set an intention. I was like, all right, I'm going to download dating apps. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to go on dates. And I was like deep into like the wellness world and things like that. But at the same time, like I found myself, I listened to a ton of podcasts, and I would either listen to podcasts that I thought were like really fun and entertaining and like, just like fun to listen to and relatable. But then I was getting this really awful advice that was like super, super toxic. Or I would listen to these health and wellness podcasts, and like, sure, there'd be good advice, but it would not be relatable. It would be like some like really perfect girl who seems to just have like really perfect temperament. And I was like, that's not me. And it just frankly would be kind of boring. And so I was like, all right, I want to start a podcast that bridges the gap. Like I want something that's fun to listen to and relatable and real, because I would call myself like, I was like, I'm just like a crazy girl when it comes to dating. And like, as much as I wish I was like sane and normal, I'm not. And like, let's embark upon this journey together and all try to like figure out what's going on and be less crazy. So that's kind of how it started. And I would talk about, like wellness concepts, but also be like very real about how far I was from the ideal in this concept. But then it was just, funny and entertaining also. But over the course of the past 2 years, like I remember when I was in Australia earlier at the beginning of 2022, kind of, I realized I was never talking about my relationship on the podcast. Oh, and during the course of the past 2 years, I did find a partner. I was going to say and settle down. I don't know what that means. I don't know. We live together, but like whatever. And I realized I was never talking about my relationship, and I had to really think about it. And I was like, oh, it's because I don't act crazy in it. Like the whole premise of the show was like how crazy I acted in dating, but like I act pretty sane in my relationship. So like what happened? And I retraced the steps and I realized that all of my like anxious attachment patterning really went away. And I like kind of had moved like, and we can talk about what that means if your audience has no idea what words I'm saying. But I realized like I really moved into secure attachment, and it's led to a very stable and easy relationship for me. And that's why I was never talking about it. And I was like, wait, I need to be talking about this because this is actually big. Like I figured out how to heal something that's plaguing so many people that isn't talked about enough. Like when people hear about it, everyone's like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, but no one talks about it. And like, it seems like I've actually figured out how to like heal it. So like, let's fucking go. Like we need to be talking about this. And so then I just started like really being open about how it was that I healed. And that's really been what the audience has like really globbed onto. Like that's what's like led to a lot of growth in the podcast in the past few months.
I want to go ahead and talk about something that was really important. And, for those that weren't aware, Hiwa was actually on my previous podcast, the Go Be Yourself podcast. And we were talking a little bit about these dating apps. And I, for one, was also of the group that didn't necessarily go into my dating apps just because I was focused on so many different things. And then a part of me said, okay, I need to go ahead and open myself back up to that game. And one of my favorite quotes from Hiva, and I might have misquoted you, but you've said in the past, if you want to get a plumber, you go to the fucking places that need a plumber. And so I went ahead and I got myself a Bumble. I did the things that you told me to do. And I felt like that advice was super important to me at the time. And it was just something where it's like, huh. And then I started to listen a little bit more about your show. I remember one of the other pieces of advice that I took was the quiz, where it was about 3 questions, if I remember. One was, what was your favorite animal? One was, what is your favorite article of clothing? And what is your favorite body of water? And I said, bear, sweater, and ocean, all in that order. So again, a lot of very important advice that I've taken away from the Blush podcast. So I'm super grateful you continue that journey, especially after, if I remember, 4 years, 100 episodes. That is no joke, a significant, awesome, amazing accomplishment for you.
Thank you so much. Wait, should we do the clothing animal thing for your audience so they know what it means?
Please do. Yes.
Okay, so everyone listening, before you answer the question, okay, I'm so sorry. My dog is just losing her mind, apparently. So before you go forward, just answer these questions in your head. What is your favorite, or what is an animal that you admire, and give 3 reasons why? What is your favorite article of clothing? Give 3 reasons why. Sam, we're trying to podcast. I don't think Joe Rogan has to deal with this. Sam. Okay. Sorry.
No worries. Dogs are, I feel like dogs are sometimes the producers on our shows. Like we consider ourselves the directors and everything, but it's really the dogs that are like the executive producers here.
I think she's the star, low key. I think she thinks she's the star, frankly. She's like, wait, I have a lot to say on this. Okay. What is your favorite article of clothing? Give 3 reasons why. And what is your favorite body of water? Now, it can be like a traditional body of water, like a lake, ocean, river, pond, whatever, or it could be like a bathtub, a pool, a glass of water, like to drink, whatever. Which is your favorite, and give 3 reasons why. Now, pause the podcast until you answer those and then come back. What are your 3 reasons?
So for me, the article of clothing that I really love is the sweater. Actually, let me go back to the first one. It's the bear. The bear, because the bear is very protective of not only himself, but also his family. Very tough, has endured a lot of endured a lot of shit in his lifetime. And so the bear ultimately keeps on going no matter what it's been through. And I feel that the bear for me is a symbol of strength as well, because of what it has to do to go ahead and survive in the wild and be the dominant influence that it is in its natural habitat.
I love that. Okay. Article of clothing. What were your reasons?
Article of clothing is a sweater. The sweater has kept me warm in terms of whenever I needed like a very comfortable, secure piece of clothing that is comfortable to wear and also keeps me warm. I always go to my sweater above anything else. It is also very flexible. Yes, I can wear it on my shirt like you're supposed to. However, I can also put it on my head in case I need to protect myself from the rain if I don't have my awesome little hat. And also the fact that I can go ahead and I can also give it to somebody, a very easy piece of clothing I can give to somebody to make them warm as well.
Oh my God, such a theme. I love it. And then for the body of water, what was it and what were your reasons?
Body of water is ocean. The ocean is vast, expansive, and you can go ahead and explore almost everywhere. Number 2, there are variation of amazing fish life, amazing creatures that are out there, from your typical fish to whales to sharks to turtles to name me something else, just because I can't think off the top of my head. I love the vastness of creatures that are out there. And number 3, just the fact that I can go ahead and I could be very versatile with the ocean. I could either swim, I could take a boat, I can scuba dive, I could do all that and more.
Okay. This is going to be fun. Okay. So these 3 questions are allegedly, I can't verify that this is true, but they allegedly come from Carl Jung, who is a psychotherapist who is really considered to be like the father of the subconscious mind. And allegedly, they point to how you subconsciously view things. So the first one, the animal that you admire, is how you subconsciously view yourself. And it's not the actual answer doesn't matter. It's the explanations. So you said the bear has been through a lot and it's still, so it's like very resilient. That's probably how you see yourself. You've been through a lot, but you're still here. What were the other reasons? Like it's protective, I want to say, of not only itself, but the people around it. Like that's something you probably subconsciously take a lot of pride in. Like you really show up for your community. And we actually saw that kind of echoed in your next one too. And what was the third reason for the bear?
The third reason is because it is a dominant force in its habitat.
Dominant force. There we go. And that's something, I mean, we all know about you, right? Like it's you aspire to and like hold yourself to so much greatness. It makes complete sense. The sweater, I love, we again saw that theme of protecting people around you, because one of your reasons was that it's easy to give to other people should they need it, which was like so beautiful. I've never seen that come up. Oh, so the article of clothing is how other people see you. So other people see you as someone who is protective of them, who shows up for them, who, I mean, like the theme of like being protective of your community is like so prevalent in your answers. A sense of security, like you said, the sweater is like warm. It provides that like shelter, kind of like that's how you show up for your community, for your friends. And then the last one is how you subconsciously view sex. And so what I'm getting from you is you like the versatility of it. You maybe like to be a little adventurous.
Okay.
There's a lot of different ways to do it.
Break, please.
I just want to point out Jordan is blushing. I know it's a great answer, but like think if you went out on a date with someone and they were like, I don't know, like I like ponds because they're shallow and you can get out really quickly. And that would really tell you a lot.
It will, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a fun little game to play with people though. It's always interesting.
I kind of knew of those answers going forward, so I knew what to expect, but just to hear it again in a different perspective, tell me exactly why I picked, again, the bear is my favorite animal. The article, my sweater is my favorite article of clothing, and of course the ocean as my favorite body of water tells a lot about myself, viewing it from the gaze or the perspective of my dear friend Hiwa. So that gives me, again, a little bit more of that enlightenment, self-discovery that we all want to go ahead and do. And I do want to come back to the Blush podcast a little bit, because I feel throughout that time that you've been creating it, you have been creating the content tailored to your audience. I do feel, while yes, it is important to give to the people, I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that you have received a part of your own, what I like to call self-discover, rediscovering yourself from creating the Blush podcast.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that I have in my life in a weird way is because of the podcast. Like the relationship that I'm in is because of the podcast. It was because of the podcast that I was pushing myself to go out on dates when it started because of the pandemic, but I would have kind of stopped because I just can be lazy. You know what I mean? So I would have probably gone out on a couple of dates and then like just given up. But because of the podcast, I had something pushing me to consistently go out on dates. Because of the podcast, I was growing so much more than I think I would have. Like I was doing so much more research into things. Like I was like taking courses on various concepts that really ended up being so healing for me. Like, yeah, the relationship that I'm in right now, which is a really good relationship, is because of the podcast, 100%, like no question about that. And it continues to be good because because of the podcast will never like if something happens, I always go internally, always, because I want to be able to, like, we got in a fight once, I don't know, like a month or two ago. We were at a wedding and and it wasn't even a very big deal, whereas usually I may have been like, cool, we got in a little fight, we move on. Instead, I was like, well, I want to talk about this on the podcast because we so rarely fight. So it's like actually really helpful. And like, I really like analyzed it a lot more than like what would be normal again, because like I wanted to really be able to psychoanalyze myself, my behavior, and like bring something for the audience. And that in turn helps me in my own life.
And it's really cool to, understand how much you grow from not only doing the content, but I'm sure you're also a student of your own content, because I'm sure you want to make sure you're giving your best self to the people that need it. And I
Mhm.
feel that the best way that you can do that is because a lot of us do play the role of creator on our podcast a whole lot. We have that hat, no pun intended. We have that hat of being the creator, but how does it feel to also play the hat of a viewer, watching your own content, taking notes and saying, I can go ahead and touch up on this a little bit, or maybe I don't need to talk about that too much, or no, I need to just stick with that topic. How important is playing that particular role on your show as well?
Ooh, I love that question. Okay. I just for my own sanity try to not like critique too much. It's a
Hmm.
weekly podcast. It's been going on for 2 years. We're 101 episodes deep right now. It's I'm like, I just really try like, so yes, I will listen to episodes sometimes and be like, okay, like this, I feel like I didn't explain that well. Like I need to go back and like readdress this or things like that. But I generally just try to like let it be once it's out and not like go too hard on myself. And instead, more use the feedback as because like sometimes I'll be like I'll get people who are like, oh my God, I need like 4 more episodes on this concept. And so like that I'll go off. And also truly, I mean my own life. So like what's coming up for me and my own life, or like when I see examples of it, especially like with my friends who are dating or things like that. Or I mean, again, I get a lot of DMs and a lot of like questions submitted. So like seeing what's coming up, like what themes are coming up for other people. But yeah, I try to not be too critical of the show itself once it's out. And that's a hard thing, honestly. Like as like a content creator or whatever, I'm sure you experience this. It's like I feel like half of my work is the actual work, right? It's like researching the podcast, recording it, editing it, putting it out, promoting it, etc. The other half of my work is on myself so that I can like hold this container, because when you're putting yourself out there, like yes, you're going to get good feedback, but you're also going to get bad feedback. And like just being able to hold that, just being able to like handle that and not like fully crumble, especially like I've had so much come through via TikTok, which is such a blessing. Like I've had a whole nother like world of an audience come in, and it's been huge and amazing. But with that also was like a ton of trolls on TikTok, like for every
Uh,
like 20, 30, 50 like really great comments, there's one that's like, I hate you, you're the worst person in the world and you should die. And you're like, what? Why? So just being able to be like, okay, there's obviously something wrong with this person. It's not a reflection of me. And like I can put it aside. Or if someone says something that stings on a deeper level, I'm always like, I use it as an invitation to be like, okay, like let me figure out why that's stinging, because like maybe there's something deeper there. Maybe they're touching on an insecurity that I can then work on in myself. So I feel like half the work that I do really is like on myself, to just be able to like hold it all and like, like not to get like too woo woo, but like really have my nervous system be strong enough to be able to hold like everyone else.
Oh, please feel free to go, as we like to go woo woo on this show, because I feel a lot of, yes, what I teach on this channel, part of it is financial investing, but I also do feel there needs to be a spiritual component when it comes to this channel, especially. I feel like that was the one thing I was missing from Keeping It 100. Even the one thing I was missing from the Go Be Yourself podcast is I touched on the spirituality, but I didn't touch it as much as I desire to. So please go ahead and continue to talk about the spirituality. That's important for a lot of people to have that inner faith. And when it comes to reviewing, I also agree. I don't try to put too much pressure on myself. I don't try to critique myself and said, oh, you could have done this better. It's more so if I can go ahead and watch myself do my own videos. Now, again, this is just my perspective, right? This is just the way I see things. But if I can go ahead and watch my own show, be engaged, focus, take notes, and find stuff that I can go deeper on, even if I know that's not the main objective, I know that if I can watch my show, I know other people can watch my show too. That was more the main point I wanted to get across.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely. Also the feedback as well, I think is very important too. A lot of the questions that come into my own videos, social media posts, I do write down on a piece of paper somewhere, and I make sure that on some episode, may not be the next episode, but a particular episode, I do want to get those questions covered, because when you think about it, the questions that come across that are said by one person is probably reflected in a lot of people that don't necessarily feel they have the courage yet to go ahead and address a question, whether it's based on what I do, whether it's based on what you do. I feel that feedback, those questions, what we could do, is in a lot of people's minds. So it's best to embrace and draw in that feedback to help better not only what you're doing, but as you said, your inner self work as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so here's another question I do have. As I alluded to, I had 2 podcasts before, and they were initially done with partners, right? I was partnered with a couple of different people here and there. And this time on this show, this is something that is just done for me. This is my own thing. This is my own independent show. I take full pride, full responsibility, full action in order to get the success that it deserves and that I desire. And so understanding that I now have this new perspective of doing the show on my own, starting from the beginning just on my own, and knowing that you've been doing that for the past 2 years, how has doing the show by yourself, how much power has that given you, knowing that you're fully responsible for its success?
It's amazing. I actually started the podcast with a friend for
Oh,
like the first year. I never really talk about this because it did not end amicably, and I never really want to throw this person under the bus, but I did
sure.
start it with a friend for the first year, and then there was a disagreement, and so I was kind of just doing solo episodes waiting for her to come around, and she never did. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna change the cover art because I haven't heard from you in 2 months, and I put out 8 episodes and it's getting kind of weird. So I changed the cover art and stuff, and then this person proceeded to cyberbully me from a Finsta for like months, like
Huh.
the better part of a year. So fun times for me. But when you're doing it with someone else, I think initially it's so much easier because you have someone else to like hide behind, right? Like it's like you share your successes, but also your failures you share, and that makes it easier. Whereas when you do it on yourself, it's all on you, like all of the responsibility and all of like the glory when things are going well. And when my friends stopped doing the podcast with me is when the podcast started to really grow. So that like from the get-go was such like an affirming sign that this is the right thing, like to actually get kind of woo-woo when something like initially just from the get-go, it started doing 4 times better just immediately. And I was like, okay, like message received, universe. And then it's just grown and grown and grown. And I remember the first time, and it was like this past summer where it was doing really, really well. We're talking like 20 to 30 times better than it was when I was doing it with my co-host. I actually missed like for a second, I was like, I wish we were still doing it together, because like it's like you kind of want to share in the triumphs with someone, but
Absolutely.
also it would have never gotten here, because the
Mhm.
reason it was there is because it was all on my shoulders, because like I had that like full responsibility that made me so much more invested in it, that made me so much more of a believer in it. Because also when you're doing things with other people, there's an amount of compromise that has to happen, which is normal. But sometimes like you're compromising your ethics and your values, or like your vision that you so firmly believe in. And so it's like there would be advice on the podcast sometimes that I was like, this is awful advice. Like, I don't like, so it's like energetically, I didn't want it to go out more, because I was like, this is terrible. Like, I don't think people should hear this,
Well,
Whereas
I
Mhm.
also say this, if you don't, I do want you to continue your point, but I do want to also go ahead and put this perspective out there to everybody, because I feel you would understand this with me. I remember I was on this Mastermind World Summit, and I was the great Trent Shelton. He was speaking at this particular event, and he told this story about going to the eyeglass store, the vision store. I still don't know what you call those particular places. I'm still just a very old soul, an old fart, if you will, living in a young person's body. So, point, I digress. He's going to the eyeglass store, and what he understands is he tries out his wife's glasses, his wife tries out his glasses, and they realize that they don't share the same vision. They don't share the same sight. And so I understood at that particular point, the reason I meant to do my own show is because I see my own vision. I see
Mhm.
what I have in store for this particular channel. And just coming now back to the origins of the Blush podcast, both you and your friend had great ideas and ideals for the show, wanting it to grow, prosper, and both of you having the same common goal of being the best relationship dating advice podcast in the world. However, the friend's vision, I should say, the friend's vision and your visions were totally different. And so,
Mhm.
in order for what you had in store for the show to grow, it ultimately had to come to a point where you had to take over by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like this has just turned into something where we're giving so much random advice. But for people listening, if you're like thinking about going into any sort of like business partnership, whatever, with a friend or an acquaintance, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying that at all, but think really long and hard about what your goals are, what your vision is, and what your values are. What those three things are today, and what those three things are going to be a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And if you think that there's a chance that those things are going to diverge over time, think really long and hard about it.
Absolutely. And again, I am so grateful. My first podcast, right? I had a fantastic gentleman, Leo Rydell, and I'll name drop him on the show because he has a fantastic YouTube channel of his own, Geekly Goods. And I like to think that both of us inspired each other to keep going, to keep pushing ourselves, and to be able to create the two outstanding YouTube channels that both he has in his own part and I have in my own part. So, even I would say, even if you do partner initially, know that there could be some other indirect benefits that could come out of it, even if
Mhm.
there is that separation part right there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I would have been too scared to start Blush on my own had I not had a
Absolutely.
friend to do it with. Like now I can do it, but like now again, like my nervous system is much stronger to be able to like hold it on my own. It's easier to hold it when you have that partner there.
And with that being said, everybody, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take just a quick little pause. All right, everybody, we are back. So I want to go ahead and touch on something that we had talked about just a little bit earlier ago, attachment styles.
Mhm,
Now, coming from my background, we were talking about anxious, I know about avoidance, and I
mhm,
know about secure attachment style. And I know that I'm at a place where I feel a lot more secure. Like I got my secure attachment style down pat. However, had to go through what I like to call anxious attachment style first. When I first started dating, right around I didn't really date until I was about 21 or 22 years old. And even through then, I knew that there were on some deep level, I was always wanting to make sure that things were okay between the person I was dating and myself. So I was the one who was getting a little bit anxious texting them. I want to say not necessarily every day, but almost every other day, almost every week. And when I didn't hear back, I got a little nervous. And then I either started calling or kept texting them, and it got bad.
mhm,
Now, I will say this, and I do take pride in this fact. I didn't necessarily blast them on social
mhm.
media, knowing because I just didn't know how that worked and subconsciously. So so I did have that anxious attachment style. Now I've gotten to a point where but it's funny. I went from then to avoidance. I went to the avoidance style because now I was just like, I wanted to play it so cool. I didn't want to necessarily show them any vulnerability that I was either infatuated, attracted, or I felt like they were compatible. So I kept it on the cool side of things. And that also kind of blew up in my face. So
Mhm.
now I'm learning this balance. And here's the beautiful thing about this, right? You could agree. Secure attachment, it's fine to call yourself secure attachment style. However, it's still important to still go through that growth. Even though we would consider secure attachment style, that's what we are right now. There's always that growth that will still come into play day after day after day after day, even if we are in that particular stage. So to my audience, it's just like, Jordan, what the hell are you talking about? Would you be able to explain exactly what those attachment styles are?
Yes. So, attachment theory is a branch of psychology, and it basically explains how human beings interact with each other. And it's premised based on how babies attach to their caregivers, their parents generally. So, we find that when infants are separated from their parents, they cry, which is normal because babies are completely dependent on their parents to be able to survive. If a baby is separated from its parent for enough time, it dies. That's it. Case closed, you know? So it reasonably cries when it's separated from its parents because it's in a life threatening situation. And it cries as an attempt to bring that connection back so that it can stay alive. And so we, in studying babies, have found that there are different ways in which babies attach to their parents and like react to the separation and then the reconciliation. And we see this same behavior in adults in their adult relationships, primarily in romantic relationships, although there are certainly different ways that we attach in other types of relationships like friendships and with our, families as adults also. But I primarily talk about it in the romantic setting because it's most prevalent there because, as infants, our quote unquote attachment partners are our parents. And as adults, our romantic relationships look quite a bit like our parental relationship as infants did. We often cohabitate, we spend a tremendous amount of time together. Like it's a lot more similar to that relationship, and the same patterning plays out. So there are generally four types of attachment styles. The first being secure, which we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about because not enough people fall into that bucket, frankly. Like people generally fall into a different bucket and then are able to heal and move towards secure attachment. But securely attached people are people who are fine being on their own. They're fine being in a relationship. They're, the healthy, functional, the aspirational type of people, who are fine opening up, being vulnerable, expressing themselves, but they also don't do it too soon. And, they move at a healthy pace. Now, anxious attachment are it's when you quite literally feel anxious in romantic relationships, specifically because your nervous system is just constantly ready and fearing that separation. So in babies, anxiously attached babies are the ones who, when their parent comes back, they're still crying quite a bit. Like they're still quite upset. Like they're really distraught when the separation happens. And it takes a while for them to recover when they're reconciled. And in adults, the way this plays out is like when you get really paranoid while you're waiting for a text from someone. When you, let's say, like, have you ever been in a fight with someone that you're dating and it's like you have to make up immediately? Like if they're like, hey, I need space, you're like, I will off myself if we don't work through this right this instant.
Guilty as charged.
I've been there. I've been there. And then anxiously attached people will go through what's called like protest behavior when there is separation in an attempt to get closer again. So this, I feel like everyone can kind of relate to. You've either seen it or you've been it. So like a baby's protest behavior is the crying, right? When they're separated from their parents, they cry in an attempt to get the parent back to them so they can be together. In adults, we generally don't do that because also our separation is like by greater distance. So you might see, like you touched on, like calling excessively. You might do that, or you might do the opposite of trying to play it like so cool to get their attention that you just like go full silent. I've done like trying to make people jealous, threatening to break up when you have like literally no intention of actually breaking up. You're just threatening to break up to like get their attention. Going hostile, like being short, being overly, like overly emotional. It's like all of these are just different types of behaviors that anxiously attached people will go through when they go into that state. It's like they're just transported to infancy when it's a life or death situation. Like, oh my God, we're separated. Like, this is terrible. Like, I might die. So I need to like do anything I can to reestablish connection. And then when that connection is reestablished, like let's say you call 100 times, they pick up on the 100th time. It's like all of a sudden, it's like you're drowning and all of a sudden you come up for like a gasp of air. Like it's that instant rush.
So I have a question, Professor Hiwa,
Uh-huh.
for anxious attachment, and maybe I'm getting it too ahead of myself because that I bring myself back to the first actual relationship, romantic wise, that I was a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time in the first 2 months where, and I'm not going to get too much into the story, but we were in the same state. And then she went long distance to pursue a particular career path. And by the way, I have no, what's the word I'm looking for? I do hope she is doing absolutely amazing in
Mm-hmm.
whatever she is doing. We wish good karma upon everybody, no matter how
Everyone.
they no matter how they entered or exit our lives. But
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely remember how that ended, and it was definitely a lot of it had to do with me. So I went ahead and not understand. I'm not going to get into what happened, but I ultimately went on Tinder and I started talking to somebody else and ultimately was trying to make a date with this other particular person, which ultimately led to then break up with said person I was with. Would you
Mm-hmm.
consider that move part of the anxious attachment style, or am I getting ahead of myself?
You know, it's hard to analyze the pure action without knowing the intention behind it. So was your intention to Like, okay, I'll say like how it could be anxious or how it could be avoidant. If your intention was like for them to find out and get jealous, that's super anxious behavior. If your intention was like, I know this is ending and I just can't bear the thought of it ending, so I need to find another distraction immediately,
That
that's
was
again anxious.
the latter, the latter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's again anxious behavior. Now, if it were just like, I don't give a fuck, whatever, there are other people out there, let me like just be on a dating app, that's pretty avoidant behavior. But like all of those, if it's like, this is so much and like I don't know how to process these feelings, like I used to always have a guy on the back burner, always, that I was like kind of talking to, like friendly with, like a guy friend who I knew liked me in case like my relationship blew up, you know? Like, this is the first relationship where I haven't done that, and it's just because 'cause I'm like, if this ends, I still have me, you know, like, I'm still good, like, it's fine.
And me, the self is absolutely amazing. Once you have yourself that this right here is good, then you have all the power in the world.
Yeah, that's so true, yeah. So another type of insecure attachment is avoidant attachment. And that is, those are the people who are kind of like islands. Like they have a really hard time being vulnerable. They don't want to get in deep with people. They tend to have like very surface level relationships, maybe like a lot of like sexual relationships that don't get much deeper than that, just tend to be like a bit commitment avoidant. And the last type of insecure attachment is fearful avoidance. So that was dismissive avoidant, technically. This last one is fearful avoidant. It's also called disorganized. This is a pretty rare attachment style. And it's basically a combination of both anxious and avoidant patterning. These people really do want connection and tend to have like all the symptoms of anxious attachment when they are romantically interested in someone, but they also have a very intense subconscious fear of love and connection and subconsciously believe that love is going to hurt them. And so they have a lot of like push and pull tendencies. It's a pretty rare attachment style, and it usually comes from like big T trauma. You know, big T trauma is like more like classic trauma, like, you know, abuse, like parents fighting a lot in the house, things like that, like just being around a lot of chaos and, you know, verbal, emotional, sexual, physical, whatever abuse. Whereas the other two also come from trauma, but like what I would call little t trauma. So, like, not so much like the egregious stuff. It's like with anxious attachment, the reason that happens is usually parents who were not fostering a sense of independence in the child, and not, you know, because they were doing anything wrong. They're just actually really playing out their own anxious attachment. So like something that we see happen a lot is like, let's say like a child is first learning how to walk and the parent might say something like, oh no, like don't like wait for me, you're going to hurt yourself. Like the message that the child receives is like, I can't do anything on my own. I have to be attached to my attachment partner. Otherwise there's danger. And if things like that happen over and over again, then like as an adult, you have this subconscious belief that if I'm separated from my attachment partner, there's danger, I could die. And so then, you know, you're dating someone and you haven't heard from them in a few hours and your nervous system is like, I'm going to die. So then you start calling excessively or like trying to make them jealous or playing games with them or whatever it is. But really, it's just your body being like, please don't let me die. We have to reconnect, and I will do anything I can for us to reconnect.
Yeah, that is definitely I just go back to my first relationship. That's exactly what happened. I was anxious attachment style right there. So I completely take, I always try to blame the other person when I didn't know any better. But now I
Mhm.
realize that it was a lot me that had to
Yeah.
do that work. And when I say avoid, I don't know if I'm just going back to my other relationships, and I certainly had to grow out of that anxious style, but then I felt I became avoidant instead of anxious, where again, I was playing it cool. If I didn't hear from them, I didn't necessarily care. I was just kind of doing my own thing. So are there instances where you can go from anxious and go to the other extreme, which is avoidant?
Um, True avoidance usually, I mean, all of these really come from childhood. So true avoidance usually comes from having grown up in a household where your needs were not being met. So like what we see a lot are parents who have like the cry it out method for their children, where like, and for a long time, this was something that we societally did say, like, oh, just let them cry it out, verbalize, whatever. But like really what happens for the child is like, I have needs, I'm trying to get them met, and they are not met over and over and over
Mm,
again. So you grow up to kind of be an island of your own, and you're like, well, subconsciously you have no reason to believe that your needs will ever be met by anyone else. And so you have a hard time getting into anything romantic. That is traditionally where it comes from. And often, people with avoidant attachment had parents who had avoidant attachment who like just had a hard time dealing with like emotions. And so
mm.
they then taught the child to not have emotions. Now it's possible that your early, like that first relationship hurt you so badly that you kind of like had some avoidant patterning come up, and you're like, my needs will not be met by another person. Like, but love is only painful. Like, love is only going to hurt me. And so that like drove you so far into that other side where you just were incapable of becoming open with someone, of becoming vulnerable with someone.
Yeah, I would say I was, yeah, that first relationship, because I didn't know, again, what dating was like. That was really my first experience. So I had no clear understanding of how this was supposed to go. So that first couple of relationships, I should say, really, I guess, took me in a way, just because, well, people have done this before. So they probably learned it a lot better back then than I would have done as a young 21, 22-year-old. And
Mhm.
so now coming back to the other side, right? We now know that self-worth is probably the most important thing that you can bring not only to yourself, but you want to bring that cup of, hey, I'm confident, I'm secure in myself, I know what my worth is. And now I feel like that right there, understanding that part first, is probably the most first primary priority thing that you need to do before you even get yourself into another relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, I think such a big part of why my current relationship is so good is because my relationship with myself is so good that like I don't need to like be anxious about anything between us. Like, just because I do like trust him and love him, and like I know that he loves me, and I don't like, I really have healed so much of the childhood trauma, so I'm no longer looping on like, what if he doesn't love me, what if he doesn't love me, which was like always my thought pattern before. But then on top of it, it's like, if things were to end between us, I would be fine because I have myself, and like no one can take that away. And that like there is no substitute for having that strong of a relationship with yourself. Where like I remember when my last relationship ended, I mean, I cried because like uh because, well, I think it's normal, but also because like I
Sure.
really felt like I hurt him. But I remember even in that second being like, kind of relieved, because because of my history of like anxious attachment, would have such a hard time ending relationships, even if I was unhappy in the relationship, like I would just stay in it. So like really just seeing the fact that I was able to end this relationship. And then on top of that, I remember thinking like, even if I were to be single until the day I die, which I doubt would be the case, but like, even if I were to be single until the day I die, I'd be fine. Like, I would truly, truly be fine.
Absolutely. And I'll even say to that point, because I went through that pain, I remember this one relationship where we go back to that problem of, I don't know how to end a relationship, mind you. I was able to be confident in ending relationship that I was indeed a part of later in life, because I do feel I grew from, okay, I am here, I have been through this, to, okay, I now see myself where you are a very special person, mind you, but I do not believe that this can go long term. So I think that growth is super important when you can do that for yourself. But I do want to go ahead and just switching from the anxious attachment or the attachment style topic to a true crisis that is going on. I
Mm.
know that a lot of people out in the world are, and understandably so, thinking about the people in Ukraine, especially with the Ukraine war that's going on over there. However, there's something that's not being talked about that I do need to bring a lot of attention to, and that's what's going on in Iran. The protest, how despicable that regime out in Iran is, and I know, you being of Persian heritage, I feel are the voice that needs to talk about this a bit more. So, Hiba, can you go ahead and bring a little bit of perspective to what is going on in Iran and how getting out the word is super important to you?
Yeah, definitely. So, the Islamic Republic has been in control in Iran since what, 79 was the revolution, 1979. And it's just an atrocious dictatorial government that oppresses and abuses its citizens. Truly. I mean, its behavior has been criminal from the get-go, the way it treats people, the way it treats women in particular. What we're seeing right now is nothing new, but there's been a new set of protests that have come up after, what has it been, like a month now, a month maybe or more. A young woman named Massa, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to do this without crying,
No, that's okay.
was
That's okay.
killed.
Let it
Thank
out.
you. Was killed because her hijab, her headscarf, was just a few strands of hair fell out. And now the morality police have been very active in Iran. This is not an unheard of thing. Many people I know have had run-ins with the morality police. The good ones are, hey, fix your headscarf. The bad ones are, they capture you, they beat you. Occasionally you might die. Which was the case with this, but people have been oppressed and unhappy for so many years, and it just set off this wave of protests that have been going on and on. Women have been cutting their hair in solidarity. Women have been taking their hijab off, which is a terrifying thing. People have been protesting in the streets. I mean, it's like a military type situation where they're just literally risking their lives. And for us to sit on a podcast and talk about like sex and relationships openly like this is such a privilege. Like the, the quickness at which I would be dead if I was in Iran right now is like, you can't do this stuff at all. And so for us to have that level of freedom and for me to be in a country where my hair, like, not only is my hair out, but like I talk about romantic relationships this openly, like that's unheard of there. And ultimately, like, we need people talking about this because the only thing that is stopping the government from killing people is the fact that there is becoming more and more attention on them. Like, they've been doing this stuff for the past 50 years with zero accountability. I mean, if you've ever seen The Handmaid's Tale, it's actually loosely based on Iran and what happened in Iran. Iran used to be a relatively free country under the Shah. I'm not saying things were perfect, but it was far more progressive than it is now. And now, people have been leading these double lives for the past 50 years, where inside the house, everyone hates the government. No one supports it. Everyone fears for their lives. But because they fear for their lives, they can't say anything outside of the house because you will get killed. You will get arrested if you do. And that house of cards is crumbling right now when people have said enough is enough. I'm not going to keep pretending. And they're really, risking their lives every single day when they step out of the house. And, it's this awful, terrifying situation. And there's no way that we can help. The only thing that we can do is talk about it, because when we talk about it, the government knows that there's attention on it and it can do less. I mean, there was a woman, a rock climber, who was competing in Korea a couple weeks ago, I want to say, and she took off her hijab while competing in solidarity, and knowing full well that when she returned to Iran, she very likely could be killed. As far as we know, she is not dead. And the only reason she's not dead is because everyone knows. Everyone knows that she did this and there's attention on her. And we need to keep that attention going to protect the people, because it's the only thing that we can do.
Now, I know that this is a very hard topic, but I really want to go ahead and just talk about this, because we really need to just go in depth about this. See, I'm a guy, and a guy I know, if I went out to Iran, I'd be okay in, I guess, this garb right here, because the Iran regime's not going to give not going to give a fuck, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm a guy, and the Iran regime is predominantly wanting to treat women as second-class citizens. Let's not beat around the bush. That's exactly what's going on. And so for a woman in her early 20s, same age as my sister, to be killed because a few fucking hair strands, that is completely barbaric. It is the sign of a despotic government that is somehow allowed to still exist in this world, when we have so many other countries that are doing it the right way, is ridiculous. And so you're right. We can't fund Iran because there's no way to get that funding out there. There are no volunteer groups because Iran is such a close state, right? And so the only thing that we can do is talk about it. So how can we get this conversation moving forward so that there is more awareness and there is more attention to it?
You know, I would like people to show the same level of, you touched on this, when Russia invaded Ukraine, I could not scroll my Instagram without every single story, every single person who was posting on their stories was talking about it. Show that same level of caring here, because in this situation, it actually makes a difference. The more we share on your social media, keep the conversation alive, just keep talking about it. That's truly, truly the biggest thing that we can do.
Absolutely. And this can't be one of these situations, because we do it in the news so much of the time, where we talk about something, give it a month or 2 or 3 or 4 months, and that's it. We move on to the next thing. I remember, and I don't mean to change the subject, but George Floyd, we were talking about this so much in 2020, and Black Lives Matter. Where's that conversation going? It feels like it's dead, and it can't be this way anymore. We're all tired of it. Anyone who has a right mind to what's going on here in this world, in this society, we can't keep doing this anymore. There has to be awareness, and until that awareness is spread, nothing is going to change. So let's make a promise that we stop this insane cycle of we talk, then we done, and we move on. I'm done with that shit.
I know, I agree. And it's with all of these issues, right? Like when Roe v. Wade was struck down, if you didn't post about it in your Instagram stories that week, people would have been like, you obviously don't care about women's rights. You obviously don't care about abortion. Like, how dare you? It's that virtue signaling that we all need. And then a week later, no one was talking about it anymore. Like, our attention spans are out of control.
By the way, fuck SCOTUS.
Yeah, truly.
who are you hurting by? I know that right now we were focusing on what's going on in Iran.
It's all women's issues, though. It's all women's issues. And like in this scenario, I don't think, sharing about it in your Instagram stories, let's say, is actually virtue signaling, because in this scenario, it's one of those very rare issues where just sharing about it is actually making a difference. But yeah, we have to keep the momentum going The good news is I do think that we are likely looking at the final stages of the Islamic Republic. I do think, unlike, there have been other times where things have really blown up and protests have gone off, I get the feeling that this is the last time. So I think we are looking at the end of it, but we all need to hold that government accountable and stay on top of it. And frankly, world leaders need to stop making, business dealings with Iran. I mean, look how quickly everyone other than Adidas, who took its time, dropped Kanye after his horrendous anti-Semitic remarks. Frankly, I think they should have done it sooner, like maybe when he said slavery was a choice. That was a pretty good time to drop him also. But whatever it took, look how quickly everyone dropped him. Like, there's no reason for other world leaders to be in business dealings with Iran right now.
There's absolutely no reason why there's no reason how come tyrants should still exist in this world.
Absolutely.
We could talk Iran, you could talk anything else that comes to mind, but tyrants in general should die. That might be a little extreme for me to say, but it is true. The death of freedom is a signal that we have lost it as society. So, Hiwa, to your credit, I'm envisioning that this is the last time we ever hear about this government outrageousness that's going on, and that Iran can finally change into the republic that its people, women and men included, can go ahead and coexist in a more peaceful fashion.
Yeah, I really hope so.
Now we're gonna come back. We're gonna go away from that heavy topic there for just a second, and I do want to go ahead and have you just tell a quick story. Now, the reason I bring this up is because as a teacher, I feel we learn most importantly by stories, where there's a teachable lesson that we can give to our audience, as well as have them commit to an action that can go ahead and take them on forward on the path to their journey in the fastest way possible, turn decades into days. And so, Hiwa, with the time remaining that we have, do you have a quick story that was so important to you that acted as a teachable lesson that you can give to the audience, as well as an action step somebody can take in order to move forward on their path?
Okay, this is a little bit unorthodox, but just hear me out. So there is a content creator primarily on TikTok named Meredith Lynch. And she talks a lot about like celebrity brands and how they're increasing the wealth gap and, just putting more products out there in the world that we don't necessarily need. And she talks about late stage capitalism, very interesting stuff. And a couple months ago, she put out a TikTok about Bethany Frankel and how Bethany Frankel is one of the few celebrities who really has infiltrated TikTok. TikTok is very like kind of an egalitarian space. And by that, I mean, it's not like when Jennifer Aniston signed up for Instagram and immediately had like 14 million followers without having posted anything. It's not like that. Like on TikTok, you really have to be active to get people to follow you. And Bethany Frankel is one of the few celebrities who's like really built a following on TikTok. And Meredith Lynch pointed out that Bethany Frankel had trademarked certain things that she was saying over and over again in her TikToks, and that she's not quite as like off the cuff and authentic as she makes it out to be. She actually has had this greater like business plan ahead of time that she was launching. And Bethany Frankel sent Meredith Lynch, like a relatively small content creator. She has like maybe 100,000 followers on TikTok, which like certainly is a lot, but relative to someone like Bethany Frankel, that's nothing. She sent her a cease and desist letter about that. So obviously Meredith touched on something that Bethany wanted to keep private. But where I'm going with this is the amount of support that Meredith has gotten since then, I mean, I feel like the entire TikTok community really blew up in support of Meredith and like wanting to have her back, like trying to offer legal services, looking at, I went to law school. And so I did talk to her a little bit about how I didn't think this had any merit at all. A lot of people have been talking about it, and just the amount of community that's come out of it and support that's come out of it, it really showed me a few things. Number one, I think that the world that we are in is so different from the world that we grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and a lot of that is because of social media. There are a lot of harms that come with social media. Don't get me wrong. I will never deny that. But the democratization of everything that has come via social media, the fact that, you can make music without a record label, without a deal, the fact that, you and I can put out podcasts without networks, the fact that anyone can embark upon any dream that they might have. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy or that it'll just fall into your lap.
Right.
None of that. But the fact that it's possible to embark upon these things without going through the traditional routes, the fact that anyone could have their voice heard, I think we're seeing a time where these bigger companies, these bigger organizations, and the archaic ways of doing things are crumbling. And we now have more power and tools at our disposal for each individual person that we've ever had. I think that's the number one thing that I've learned from this experience. The number two thing is like the importance of community and the importance of communal living, the importance of showing up for each other in life. It's truly the most important thing. I mean, the number one marker of like how happy you are, how successful you are in life really is the community that you have around you. And so I guess my takeaways from this story is like, number one, no matter what you want, go for it, because we have tools at our disposal that were unheard of even 10 years ago. It was unheard of that you could just go on TikTok, upload a video, and it could get millions of views. Like you could start a whole career this way. That's completely unheard of. And like whatever it is that really lights you up, and there's an empty space like with Meredith, like this is just stuff that's interesting to her, and she does some research into publicly available information. It just packages it and represents it in a way that like not only means something to her, but she's putting out information in the world that people need. So like whatever it is that really lights you up and that there's a bit of a void of, like find where in the market it's not being done in the exact way that you can bring it, and just start putting it out, because the world needs all of these different voices. And then like my second takeaway is like really lean on community building, whether it's building an online community or in person, or really, I think both. Like there's room for both in our lives. And then
Wow.
was there a third question related to the story I was supposed to answer?
Yeah, so we've already covered the story absolutely beautifully, if that's a word. And then we talked about the teachable lessons that were of course resonated with this
Mhm.
particular story. And so now number three, understanding what happened with that particular TikTok situation, knowing the lessons about how important community is, what technology that we have on our disposal to not even just create the fantastic podcast that we have put together, but all the different voices that are out there truly expressing themselves and being able to become free in what they're doing. What is one action step that you can give to anybody out there that's really trying to build the path that they are not only destined to do, but they desire to do as well?
Okay. I have one that actually touches on both of those prongs, both the community and the, using social media. So going back to how social media can be problematic, I've read a lot of studies on this, and people who use social media a lot as just voyeurs, as just observers, tend to become more anxious and more depressed from their social media use versus people who engage tend to actually get a lot of satisfaction and happiness from their social media use. So the action step that I would give for everyone listening, and it's a few things, but they're under the same umbrella: do not stalk without engaging. Like, don't use a Finsta account to stalk people. Don't like, when you use your social media, use it intentionally, even if you're not using it to create at this exact moment. Like, maybe there's something you want to create and put out there, but you just don't feel ready. That's fine. With the accounts that you follow, engage with them, DM them, comment on them. Don't just be an observer on it, because when you engage, you're already starting to build community, and studies show that actually makes you happier versus if you're just sitting there and looking at things. And I also really advocate, do not check who is checking your stuff. Don't check who's looking at your stories. Don't turn off likes on Instagram. Turn off all of these like reward measures that then really affect your brain. So just use social media as a community building tool, engage, and don't use it as like, who's looking at me, or like, let me secretly look at this person from a fake account so they don't know I'm looking at them. All of those games.
Well, shoot. Looks like I still have work to do on myself and understanding that second part. But that is all right. That is something that now I know I have taken in. Very grateful for that tip, because yes, it's going to help the audience, but now it has certainly helped me in what I need to do to become the person that I desire and destined to become. And so with that being said, Hiwa, this has been an amazing episode, a really amazing conversation. I feel like we're able to talk about so much. And even though it's been like an hour and 20 something minutes, I don't really feel like it's been all that long, to be honest with you. And so unfortunately, this, as with every great story that's out there, this does need to come over to the final chapter. And that final chapter is a very important question that my audience does need to hear. There's a lot of pressure on you to get this right now. So where can the people follow you?
Okay, on Instagram at blushpod, BLUSHPOD. And my personal is HIWAAAAAAAA. That's 8 A's.
I'll make sure to get that down for everybody.
And on TikTok at blushpod, BLUSHPOD. I also, if the attachment stuff is interesting to you, I have a bunch of courses related to that. There's a breakup course, there's pipe picking, there's just attachment healing, there's a bunch of stuff. And you can find things on my website, theblushpod.com, or in my Linktree.
And all links will be provided on either wherever you're viewing this particular post from, either the Finsta, and to all the fuddy-duddies around my age that don't know words. Finsta is Facebook and Instagram, right?
No, it's a fake Instagram.
You see, that's why I am a fuddy-duddy, because I don't know all this information. A quick story. I didn't know what NGL was. I was like, my friend said NGL. I'm like, what the heck? What the heck does NGL mean? It's like, oh, dude, it's not going to lie. I'm like, well, see, that's how you know I am definitely not with the times. So with that being said, Finsta, fake Instagram, definitely don't do that. Hiwa, thank you so much, and super grateful for you to be on the show. And it was an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Absolutely. And so for my good friend Hiwa, this has been Jordan Rosario with the World Changing Podcast. I'll in close, I submit to you some 3 very important statements. Be great, be favored, and be the person that you desire and that you're destined to become. Thank you.